In cross-border payments, we a lot of cross-border payment companies have like massive audacious goals, right? And it's usually rooted in expanding into new corridors, capturing a very huge market share, ensuring that we get customers who are doing transactions every other day, so that we can get our total transaction volume up every single time. And the common themes that I have seen with having to chase these very big audacious goals is that they ignore real life constraints when it comes into it, execution.
Today on the Colorteam Podcast, I'm excited to welcome someone who sits at the intersection of product, fintech, and the African diaspora economy. Olatunji Obaoye is a former head of product at AfriChange, a fast-growing cross-border payment platform serving immigrants and diaspora communities across multiple markets. From the early days of the company, he has played a key role in shaping the product strategy, building systems that make sending money home faster, more affordable, and more accessible. What I find particularly interesting about Tunji's journey is that it is not just about fintech, it's about infrastructure, it's about trust, and it's about building products that solve real problems for real people navigating life across borders. Today, we're diving into how ideas move from strategy to real execution and what that really looks like when they're building products in fintech. Tunji, welcome to the Colorteam Podcast. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's awesome to be here as well. Super excited to get into it.
Amazing. So today we're going to be talking about how you turn strategy into execution. I have a few questions lined up, and just feel free and just have that conversation.
Awesome.
So the first one on my list here is: have you ever looked at a brilliant strategy and thought that this is never going to work in reality, and what gave that strategy away?
Yes, I have. And I have like really interesting stories for this, but we'll stick with just a couple of, just some few examples. And in cross-border payments, we a lot of cross-border payment companies have like massive audacious goals, right? And it's usually rooted in expanding into new corridors, capturing a very huge market share, ensuring that we get customers who are doing transactions every other day, so that we can get our total transaction volume up every single time. And the common themes that I have seen with having to chase these very big audacious goals is that they ignore real life constraints when it comes into it, execution, right? So I'll give you a very good example. So early on in my career at AfriChange, one of the massive goals that we had was, we want to expand into multiple countries, right? And once we expand into these multiple countries and we acquire customers from each of these countries, if all of them do different transactions, it will push our transaction volumes up. On one hand, to get us to increase our customer base. But one of the biggest constraints with expansion is that we fail to understand how do we get that customer to carry out the first transaction, right?
Yeah.
So this is just distilling it down. Now, if the massive goal is that we want to expand, right? But question is that, before the first transaction, is to break it down into different buckets, like what are the regulatory constraints in achieving this particular goal? Because you can't say you want to expand into the UK, for example, or go into Australia or go into Canada without having a deep understanding of what the regulatory frameworks in those environments are, right? So it's the goals are always big, but you need to distill it down into um, it has to fit into the environment in which you're playing in, or in the environment you want to play in. So in the case of Africhange, for example, when we say we want to do all of these goals, one of the big things that we have to think about is that, okay, what are the regulatory guidelines in this environment? Once we have looked at that, we now have to start thinking about, okay, how do we even get that first customer in this environment to do a transaction, right? Because if he's able to successfully do his first transaction and he's excited at the end of that journey, the
Mhm.
potential of him referring people to come and use the application is also very high, right? So
Yeah.
you know, you have to ask very, very important questions. Other questions that you can ask in this kind of scenario is that, okay, we are playing in the payment space. We want to do this expansion. If customers in these countries successfully onboard and they try to do transactions and it fails, how do we handle that? So the point here is that, a strategy that is not that hasn't wrestled with hard constraints, right? Which in this kind of situation is your regulatory requirements, your partner reliability. How do you want to handle support when they come? How big is your team to even handle all of these constraints when it happens, right? If it hasn't wrestled those really hard constraints, then it isn't a strategy, it's just a wish, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So for me, it's always starting off with, what are those hard constraints? What are the trade-offs to these hard constraints? Then we actually have to name them and figure out ways to solve those problems, right? Distill it down to its most minute substance, right? Before we now say that, okay, let's go ahead and go into execution. If it isn't um, properly distilled down, if we don't look at all of the very difficult constraints and figure out ways to undo them before they happen, what you would most likely find is a beautiful strategy that would fail even before you even do anything.
Right.
So yeah. So that is like some of the experiences I've had and how this relates to answering this. I don't know if this makes sense.
No, 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 it does. It does. I think now I'll just triage a little bit of like just the tandem of this and ask what is more dangerous in this case now? Is it building slowly, right? So taking your time to, understand each market that you're trying to get into, or building too much or building faster? Like how would you approach it?
Well, with every um software product, right? There, especially with startups, right? There's always that we need to do that ship right now. Um, and we have to always balance speed with quality. You just have
Mm-hmm.
to always figure out a way to balance both of them out. But what I've come to realize is that there's something we call um, shipping iteratively in management. A lot of product managers will understand this. And what I've come to realize is that when you want to move, when you're building and speed is a priority, you have to distill down to its barest minimum, which in this case we would call the MVP, right?
Exactly.
And when you distill down to its most basic form and you push it to markets immediately,
Yeah.
you can instantly gather feedback, right? Use that to improve on the products and get it into the market as fast as possible. But then it depends on the concept of speed versus quality depends on what you're building as well. Because take for example, if you are building an API infrastructure that businesses in multiple countries have to use, right? Because those people are relying on your infrastructure, you have to prioritize quality before you prioritize speed. So speed in that kind of
Cause
situation may look like we are shipping in 8 weeks, not shipping in 2 weeks, right?
mm,
But if you're building a consumer product like a cross-border remittance product, for example, that you know that by the time you build this thing, you have a market that is ready. People would constantly use this thing on their day-to-day, on a day-to-day basis, right? In those kind of situations, you want to ship as fast as possible so that you can gather feedback. And the reason is because you have other players, that will ship probably faster than you, right? And get that same solution to the hands of the customer, right? And they'll do that. So you want to ensure that whatever it is that you're building is shipped fast so that you can gather feedback and make that product better. So it's again dependent on the product, it's dependent on the market you're playing in, right? It has different, areas in which you have to look at, but the main thing is that it depends on what you're building. If what you're building is a consumer app, an e-commerce website, you know, something that customers will use on a day-to-day basis, you want to ensure that you are building and shipping fast. But if you're building something in which businesses, say multi-billion dollar businesses, they have to rely on, you definitely won't want to go and ship rubbish, right?
Right, right, right.
So in that kind of case, you need to balance, you don't have a choice but to balance speed and quality.
Right, because essentially, B2C, you might still have some kind of, and you can correct me, of course, because you're the product master here, but the B2C, you have more like, wiggle room to try things and test things because, you get feedback from the customer. Or with B2B, people are paying, wads of cash to get this service or get this access to your API. So you have to be more careful. But let's
Oh,
talk about
yes.
restraint. Let's dive into restraint, right? In fintech, you have a lot of, products and features that you can possibly ship, right? Um, the question then becomes, how do you decide what not to ship? Because, at the end of the day, subtraction is also a way of building things, right? It's a way of improving things, right? So how do you decide what not to ship?
Mm. So for me, it would typically start with what what would we not build if we build this, right? So basically, what that means is that what's the opportunity cost for this particular thing?
Mm, okay.
You know, most people skip past this question and just go straight into let's build. You would hear different people would tell you that with software businesses, don't think too much. Just build it and drop it in the market and get people to use it, right? But what really is, you know, what's the opportunity cost for this particular solution? Everybody talks about what a feature could do, but people rarely talk about what that feature costs, you know. And cost in this situation isn't in terms of money, it's in terms of how much are we pouring into this? What's the team capacity? Does the team have the capacity to build it in that moment? When they do, and it's shipped, will it bring back the type of return that we are looking for? Because the effort that team has put into it is cost on its own side, right? That's hours, resources that could have been channeled into something that, would probably deliver on that result, and even things like focus, right? Because um, when you're building something or, something you're not supposed to build, you know, you're distracting people from the things that would mostly add value, if that makes any sense. So, um, a very good way to manage this is using a scoring system, right? So, in some of the roles that I have, in some of my own real life experiences, one way that I would always use is let's build out a scoring system. And before we even get to anything serious, we want to define a couple of things. First thing is that if we want to build this thing, right, will it move a metric that we care about in 90 days,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Um, do we on Another question is that do we actually understand, the problem we are solving for? Because one of the mistakes that we make is that we typically have great ideas and we build, right? But does it actually solve a problem? right?
For the user. Yeah.
For the person, the end user at the end of the day. Um, Another thing is that can you execute this thing based on your current constraints? Now, if you there's a trend amongst and a lot of people that own software businesses would agree that there is no end to the number of ideas that we would have. And as a result, you constantly find that people are constantly building. Now, if you have a very small team, for example, or even a large team that are currently building something, and it's back to the idea of the cost behind building this thing. Are you sure that you understand the problem enough, and you know that this problem will solve a defined, it will solve a problem that the customer has, right? Um, are you sure that you're willing to commit the resource that you have in-house to building this thing, knowing that it may or may not deliver value? So you have to be able to answer those questions very well, right? You have to be able to define things like, okay, what are the success metric for this thing, right? Does it actually contribute to the bigger vision that we have? Does it contribute to that metric that we care about, or is it even a metric we care about? Do you have the necessary people to develop these things? Um, can you build these things under the current constraints that we are living in?
Yeah.
So if you have a feature that is scored poorly using this kind of framework, say on a scale of 1 to 3, right? One being the lowest or zero being the lowest. If so, a real life visual way to go about this is put those 3 questions in. So you have your scale 1 to 3. You know, does it meet a metric that we care about? 1 or 2 or 3, right? Does it actually solve a problem that we know we truly understand, right? 1 to 3. Can we execute this based on the number of constraints that we have? Remember that your constraints are not just your team resources. It could be infrastructure resource. It could be regulatory constraints, right? Can you deliver this within these current constraints? You put 1 to 3 there. If your score, right, comes back and it is less than the 3, the idea here is not to dead it or kill it. It's to
Uh,
document and backlog it, right? Because right now we do not have the capacity or the capabilities to handle this thing. Or right now, this thing does not meet a metric we care about. Or right now, we're not very clear as to the problem we're solving with this thing. So we
yeah.
document and we'll come back to it, right? But the idea here is that you have to maintain that discipline, right? That's
Objectivity. Yeah.
exactly. You have to maintain it, and you have to be able to. And the thing is that this idea may not even work in that time, but it will work in 2 or 3 years from now. So you should also be open to come back to revisiting it, checking if your circumstances have changed. Do you have a larger team now? Do you have like all the required licenses now to operate in this market?
Uh,
Or
uh.
it, are we clear on the metric that this thing is going to contribute to, right? Once you're able to have all of these things, then you can then go into your prioritization and then prioritize it accordingly to build.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, what I'm taking away from this is the way you look at the feature, let's call it the feature now, you look at it objectively, and you actually use a system to determine if it's something that the team can actually ship at that point in time, if you have the capacity within the team to actually make that product or make that feature get shipped. And also that you are not, if you do then realize that it's not going to be, the best time to ship that product, you put it in a sandbox, right? You just put it somewhere that you can always come back to,
Mm-hmm.
to revisit it. So that's
Yeah.
something that we can take away from this.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And product boys will say that it's backlog. we s- we say we put it in a backlog and we come back to revisit it. Then we
but
prioritize accordingly
do
every
you ever
time.
go back to it? Do you ever go back to this backlog?
Yeah, it depends, right? It depends on. So a very good example is that I don't know if you remembered in 2020 or 2021, Emefiele, former CBN governor in Nigeria,
Right.
woke up one day and just banned crypto, banned people from transacting with crypto, right? So you could not exchange your crypto for naira and have that naira in your bank account, because if you are doing that, then you get your account blocked, right? I remember that we were building a product at the time. We had to like sunset that product because of that regulations. Now, a different company would that I also know about looked at that problem, right? And they found a way around navigating that. Oh, not a different company. Let me come back to the same way on how we were able to navigate it. So
Right.
there was this idea, because we started off as a crypto remittance company called Crypto Fully at the time. And AfriChange was in the backbone as a fiat remittance company. So fiat is
Right.
just being able to use your actual cash,
Cash. Yeah. Yeah.
cash that you have in your bank account to be able to send. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, we were experiencing a crypto boom across the world, right? And the fiat remittance company was sort of deprioritized. A great idea, but it was just there in the back burner. And we had built crypto fully at the time for close to a year. Then one day, our Oga Murphy woke up and decided to throw in that crypto ban, right? In that
Mhm.
situation, because AfriChange had been like something that was that the business team were brewing up for a number of time now, but because of the constraints that existed in that moment, we couldn't just go into it. Because of that single regulation or regulatory shift, we had to pivot. Now that
Yeah.
pivot led into what AfriChange is today. Right. Now,
Mm.
if AfriChange wasn't in
In the back
somewhere in the
burner.
market,
Mm. Okay.
and
Okay.
those regulatory issues did not exist, we probably would never come to it. But because of that little shift, we were able to pivot immediately. And because we already had all the things that we needed to do, the market research had been done.
You
We had
just ship.
defined a lot of things. We just went into building and shipping. So
Makes sense.
sometimes the ideas may not be good, right? And in that case, you may need to now say you want to constantly deprioritize it until you have all of the, you have all your T's dotted and your I's dotted and your T's crossed, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes too, those ideas may be solid enough for you to go into and ship immediately due to something that just changed. It's just to be able to balance and answer those questions correctly, right? Can you know, do we care about this problem that we solve? Are we clear on the problem that we are solving and the solution we're bringing into the market? With all of this clarity, I think and I believe that you can always come back to it, revisit it, change it based on your current circumstances, and then build and ship.
Makes sense. I mean, this example you gave is just like perfect because you were trying to build something and then you had a almost ready product in the backlog,
Oh, yeah.
as you guys would say, and then you just bring it forward and just move forward with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about red flags now. So what would you call a red flag, right? Or okay, let me say, how would you call a feature a red flag or target a red flag if you know is it ego driven or user driven, right? Let me try to rephrase. So you know how, from my own perspective, right? You see a a new feature that a competitor has released, right, or has put to the market, right, and then you be like, you want to do that. I believe that that's how you say it's ego driven. Like you want to do better than that competitor. You want to ship a feature that is more that offers more to the user than the competitor. And then on the other side, there's a way you can actually, take a step back and actually look at your users and listen to them and understand what pains that they are currently going through, and then build a feature that answers that question, right? How do you as a product leader, how do you know, build a system like you did earlier on, like to also weigh, when it's ego driven, the feature, or when it's user driven?
Mm. So the interesting thing is that when it's ego driven, okay, so ego driven versus user driven. So when it's ego driven, they are usually signs, right? That you'd know, right? And obviously most product people would or anybody that even works in a startup would know would have experienced this at some point in their
Mm.
careers, right? So one of the red flags that you'd see is when the person is describing the feature by what it should look like, right?
Mm.
And not what problem is solving. So you probably may have experienced this situation whereby somebody will come and tell you, "Oh, I want to build a travel blog." And in this travel blog, people will be able to come and um see the different foods that they can eat in different places. And I'm going to put like all of the foreign foods on it so that they can also try it out. And they'll be able to view flight itineraries and see cheap flights, right? And XYZ. But my very first question, usually in those kind of situations, is okay. Yes, it can be very nice. We can put UI UX on. In short, we can throw in AI and make it very very AI-ish, right? So you can call it an AI travel blog. But the question is, what problem does this solve?
Right.
Can you articulate the problem it solves, right?
Mm.
So to put things into perspective, for example, at AfriChain, we would say that we want um, immigrants in specific areas. So immigrants in the UK to be able to send money home fast, right? The reason why that statement is there is because the underlying problem we're solving is that immigrants in that country probably don't have a means to send money or a means to send money home fast.
Right.
Right. So the question is, what problem does this thing solve? If you are unable to answer that question, then you know that it is somebody that just probably woke up in the day, had a light bulb moment, and thinking about the problem, if an idea that, oh, I need to make money, right? Or I need to make money next. And when you ask that person, what problem does this solve? You see that they start rambling, right? There's usually it's usually not properly articulated. Um, and it is always focused on the shiny thing that they want to do. So we want to throw in AI, right? And if you throw in AI, if you chat with it will be able to tell you the different destinations you can go to in 90 days. But do people actually have problems with
With that.
looking for
Mm.
looking for where they can go to or travel to for vacation in 90 days, right? So one of the red flags, that's typically one of the red flags, right? The focus is always on what it looks like, what it can do, but it never stems from what problem that thing is solving for. Another red flag that I've seen is that the idea, and this is just working in different companies, right? The idea is usually coming from one person, and that one person is, for a lack of a better word, right? The person is usually just, it could be one very loud customer, right? That probably has, that just likes ranting on Twitter, right? Or it could be maybe an investor that just said in passing that, if we had this, um, we'll be able to X3 or X4 our transaction volume. Or your competitor, okay, very good example was the one you gave earlier, right? Your competitor just announced a feature. We want to launch platinum cards to our customers, and
Mm.
instantly you're like, let's go and build that because our competitors are doing it. And when you see those kind of situations, and I actually learned this from one of our growth guys, our growth manager at the time, because when when we build this thing and we come to say, my guy would always ask me that, okay, now we have this thing, it's nice, it's
Mm.
great, but the question is that, what problem does it solve?
Right. Very important.
Okay, how many customers complained about this problem before you went ahead to build a solution for it, right? Because take a remittance application. The reason why people will come out and build remittance applications and ship those things out is because like a lot of customers have that problem, right? Is either, and you see that they're all mostly solving for the same problem, right? It's either speed, right, or cheaper rates, or better infrastructure, so reliability. those are like the three buckets you mostly find most remittance companies playing. And the reason is because those problems exist and it's affecting a lot of immigrants.
Of
So it is
people,
not just
yeah.
maybe Nigerian immigrants, right? It could be Asian
Mm.
immigrants, it could be American immigrants, but it's a problem immigrants face. So, and you will find that that problem is shared amongst a very wide variety of people. So when you see this kind of red flags, and so basically when they come and they say, okay, we want this feature, and you say that how many people actually experience this problem, you find that it's just one person or it's two or three people that just said it. Maybe they were at a conference and a group of people were just bouncing ideas around and they said that, okay, this is great, without forgetting that there needs to be an underlying problem that is solving for, and it has to be affecting a lot of people, so that by the time you are shipping that thing and your growth guy or your marketing guy goes into the market with all of their very nice creatives and all of the nice copies, right? Once they say that this is the problem we are solving for, it resonates amongst multiple people, right? So the way I've been able to navigate it has mostly been asking these questions. Number one, how many of our users have these problems? How often do they have this problem? Right? Um, I would ask questions like, or if the answer, for example, is okay, maybe one of our enterprise customer has it, then I'll be like, that's not enough to prioritize this over other things. Right. So it comes back to, let's bring this back, put it in our backlog, and
Right,
then
right.
focus on the problems that actually matter and actually move the needle. Because one thing that you don't also want to do is building features that nobody will use. I've been there, right? And at the end of the day, the person that brings that idea isn't the person that will be punished for it, right? So I'm just using punishment loosely here, so please don't quote me like punished. But the idea is that you're going to be the one held responsible for the success of that solution, right? Or the failure of it. So you don't want to end up building something that nobody is going to use. So a way to avoid that is just to ask the question. So how many people, what's the problem we're solving for? Number one, how many people is actually experiencing this problem? How often do they experience this problem? Right? When you're able to answer those questions or ask those questions and you don't get tangible answer, well, the just defaults to normal lingua. Oh, it's not enough for us to prioritize it in this moment because it's not affecting the very huge. Like, we don't see the opportunity. But let's say, for example, they actually come with this thing, and you yourself go into the market. You check and you see that, using a very good example, which I think a number of immigrants abroad would very much likely relate to. You
Yeah.
sent money, for example, and then you waited hours before that money landed.
Mm.
You know, that problem, if you go on Twitter, you see like a lot of people complaining about that kind of problem, right? If you say that I want to sit down, like our customers are chasing for this solution, they are complaining about this thing, then you can bring that in and then have those brainstorming sessions, figuring out ways to solve for those kind of problems, right? And there are also ideas that may be novel, right? In the sense that, maybe you saw something somewhere, you think if you bring it in, this is going to move the needle. Those kind of ideas, in as much as the person bringing the idea may have good intentions and may say that, okay, I believe that this thing is going to fly, is to also challenge it with very difficult questions. So, what problem is this solving? How many people are experiencing this problem? Then you go into the market and search yourself. Go on different public forums. Twitter is a very good one. You want to go on Twitter, for example, read through multiple people's comments, right? See if you can draw out a pattern to how they are complaining about these things, and even if it is it even an issue, right? And then from there, you start building. So to just wrap this up, the most dangerous ego features, yeah, they are the ones with good user language wrapped
Mm.
around it, right?
But
They
not
sound like
grounded. Yeah.
it's not grounded in research. And at the end of the day, that is what it should be grounded with. They sound like they're about the users. They sound like, this problem exists. But if you are able to trace back to the real origin of that problem, right, you find that it's just somebody that wants that has a vision of what the product should look like, but you'd also find that it's not rooted in anything. Is fluff, for a lack of a better word.
You
Yeah.
mentioned two things that I'll try to come back to them if I can just recollect
Yeah.
them. But
So
one thing was you mentioned that you have built this beautiful thing, and you as a product guy and your team, you're excited about it, right? And then you go and show the growth guy who is going to push it to the market, right? To the marketing team, and then he gives you that reality check, right? So my question is going to be in this way, right? At what point? No. So at what point do you involve the growth guy, so that he's not surprised after you build the product?
mm. Oh, so this one may be a bit a lot of people may not agree with this, but I strongly believe that now, not just growth, right? Depending on the feature that you're building, you should always
Mm-hmm.
identify who the key stakeholders are, right?
Right.
Because there are some features that the growth people will probably not sell, right? That it may just be something internal. But it just depends on the kind of feature. The first thing is always to identify the key stakeholders, and the next thing is to bring them in at the point of ideation, not at the
Exactly.
point of execution, right? Now, the reason is this. Let's take a cart functionality as an example. If at the beginning of the journey, right, we say we want to build a cart functionality for IJGBs that are just going, so I just go back, that are going to Nigeria for 30 December, for example, or going to
Exactly.
Ghana,
Exactly.
for example, right? And at ideation phase, right, a number of people will look at their role and base their questions, or they will throw out questions based on the things that they are expected to do. So a growth person, for example, would be asking you from that day, what problem is this thing solving?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the users that will use it? Can you give us a profile of what these customers are like? Right? Um, what are the use cases for these particular features or this particular feature? Right? A growth person would ask you that. A data person or your business intelligence person, for example, will want to tell the engineers that, see, oh, when you are building this thing, ensure that the data structure for this thing is sits in a specific way, so that by the time product is coming to ask me for data, right, I can pull it easily and not delay his work. Or if marketing is coming to ask me for data, I can pull that easily. Your compliance person is telling you that, see, if you go and do this thing this kind of way, right, if you
Mm.
don't KYC that customer, for example, before you issue that card to them, and the compliance CBN people come with their wahala, you are in trouble. Oh, and I don't want to be in that trouble. So you must ensure that anybody that's going to use this thing, you have their KYC. Another person will come and give you that requirement at ideation.
At the
So at
beginning.
ideation, right at the very beginning. So ideation is really at the beginning. So at the beginning, you want to ensure that you have all the key stakeholders involved. As a product person, you want to ensure that you have all of them contribute to that solution, so that by the time we're getting to execution, even before we get to execution, you can go to growth, for example, and tell them that, Alpha, we're about to launch. Oh, what's the marketing plan for this thing, right? Because right at the very beginning, you people have also aligned on what the success metrics are. You understand? So
Yeah.
you want to not ask him that, okay, well, based on this our success metrics, so once we build this thing and we get it to this thing, what's the plan to market? To get this thing, to distribute it, or to get it in the hands of the people that will use it. How are you looking to communicate it based on the customer profiles that I have given to you? And so on and so forth. So by bringing them in at the beginning, they have sufficient time to plan for it. They have sufficient time to do their own research and come up with a plan that is solid based on the information you've given. And by the time you're about to launch, you guys are already aligned, right? Everybody knows what problem we're solving. Everybody know the people that we're targeting. Everybody understands the use cases and the potential edge cases. So the edge cases here are the situations or scenarios that we probably would not expect, or rather that we expect our customers to do, that will break the system, right? So you have all of those things written down. or you have them built into the solution, so that by the time you are saying that, okay, it's time for launch, everybody already knows what their roles are. They know what they are supposed to do. They know what the expected feedback from the customer would be, and everybody can just chase that single metric. But if it is a case like I learned the hard way, where you now get to, you're about to launch, right? And then your growth person now comes to ask you, what problem does this solve? And you don't have an answer. What will happen is that, number one, if I force it, I tell them that, see, guys, we built it, it has to go live. What you'll find is that it will go live, right? But these guys, one half of the team is probably trying to figure out, how do we communicate this to the customer, right? And you have that functionality in production. If they cannot identify that, then they will just start shooting out just anything, which will not give you the desired result, or it will not allow you meet the success metrics that you have defined. So it's always best to start at the very beginning, right? You want to ensure that everybody is aligned on the problem you're solving, who you're solving that problem for, where they are, the potential way these customers will use this solution, right? Just, you have to align on these things and a lot more before you go to production or before you launch.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I agree. I mean, you mentioned that some people are not going to, jump on this bandwagon of, starting to include everyone or the stakeholders at the beginning. But I think, of course, I agree with you as bringing everybody in, at the ideation stage, so that, we are all moving in one direction from the very,
Yeah.
from very get go. But I'll
Yeah.
take it back again to one thing you mentioned, which, I didn't factor into the questions I was going to ask, which is investors, right? Because they are, they're putting the cash down, they're putting the capital down, right, for the business to keep moving. So at what, of course, in that ideation stage, I don't really see, maybe they will be in that conversation as well. But when do they get involved? How do you carry them along, when you're building features, and, also communicating back to them how those features will, convert to, ROI for them?
Okay, so with investors, in my experience, they probably would see me once in the blue moon, right? They are mostly, interfacing with the business team, right? The core business team, like the CEOs, the COOs, and the likes. Um, but it's always in written communication, right? And helping the people you're reporting to, so the CEOs, the COOs, you're helping them with sufficient context so that they know how to navigate that conversation. Um, as one of my very good friends would say, context is king. Context in the sense that I'm not telling you that we cannot build this solution because, well, we don't think it will work. I'm saying that we may not be able to build this solution at this moment, mostly because of constraints, or mostly because we're not clear on the problem that we're looking to solve. We need further clarity, right, on what the problem is, so that we know how to approach the solution. So everything comes down to context, being able to properly articulate this context and ensure that they understand the reason why that is not being picked up at this moment, right? I want to believe that, or rather, I believe that with investors, communication is a lot different, right?
Mm.
Um, it is not. So, if, for example, my CEO comes and says, "Go and build X, Y, Z," and then I tell my CEO that, what problem are we solving? And my CEO says, "I don't know. Just go and build it," right? It is now for you, and this is where it gets tricky. It is now for you to now go and see if you can figure out what the problem is. If you can't figure that out, is to come back and get context. Okay, how did you arrive here? What were you thinking about? You know,
Mm.
maybe you can then make sense of that. Then coming back, going back to the market to go and find it, find that problem, or find a problem you can solve that is tied to that. And if you can't find, is to just articulate it and explain, oh, yes, we understand that. Yes, we have to build this thing, but can we deprioritize it and focus on this bit for now? Then we come back to it, right? Now, you have to be careful with how this is being communicated. It's because the CEO may be under the pressure of his investors to deliver on that service,
Always, always, always. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you have to be very careful with how this is being communicated about it being deprioritized. Now, there are some times when they will tell you, "Oh, see, I don't care, get it done right now." In that moment, you also still need to do your own homework. You also need to go into the market and find. So you have to go and find, problems. You have to go and find the problem. It's funny, but you have to go and find it. And the way you do this, or rather, to better say this, or to say this a lot better, it is you need to go and validate that that problem exists. So you want to speak with customers, right? You want to speak with the users. You want to go and do your market research, right? So you want to go into your Reddit, you want to go into Twitter, you want to go to Facebook groups, public forums where you can easily, see people having these types of conversations. You want to join those conversations yourself and ask if you can interview those people, right? Because you are building a solution for it, right? Then validate if
So
that is the right problem to solve. If you now identify that it is not the right problem to solve, now what you have done would do is that you have gone into the market yourself. You have done the research. You have spoken with the customers. You have data to back your decision up, right? So I'll give you an example. When we were going to expand into the UK, um, I remember that business did not want to spend money. It's a new market, right? You want to get product market fit first before you start saying you want to go all in into marketing. But now this idea came from me, not from business this time. It was me going into the market, speaking with people, asking them, Alpha, have you done this one? Like, what are the better ways for us to serve you to ensure that, you are constantly using us? And they told us that, see, while you guys are great at speed, your product is not easy to use. Easy to use in the sense that when it comes to our payment method, they want us to add some new payment methods that would enhance that experience for them. And I remember that I've spoken with about 10 people at the time and they have told me the same thing. I went to business. Oh, see, this is what customers are asking for. We don't have the money to use to do this one right now. Duh. But I felt very strongly about it. Right. So in that moment, I went to support, spoke with the head of support. We ran surveys. Now we expanded the reach and we got like 500 people to contribute to that survey. And these guys all said the same thing. So I went back with data. We have to do this thing, right? So
now you have the data.
now I have 10 customer interviews. I have data from over 500 people with all of them. So I have over 510 real life and surveys to back my claim up. This is the reason why we should do this. And we eventually did that. It doubled our transaction volume. Let's now spin that around, right? Business comes and tells me we need to introduce a card feature. And I'm like, everybody is giving a card feature. What problem is this particular card that we are doing? What problem is it going to solve? We don't know. Go and figure it out. Right. For me, yes, everybody was issuing card at that time because, and it was around December period. People were not even giving Naira cards. But what I would now realize was that while everybody was issuing, virtual USD cards and all of those very nice stuff, very few people were giving Naira cards, especially for the Nigerian diasporans that are coming to Nigeria in December. Because now they have to once they get into the country, they have to now start figuring out, how do I convert this my USD, right, into Naira, or this my GBP into Naira. So, but business had told me go and introduce a USD card, right? So in this particular situation, it was me going into the market, discovering that, see, there is a gap in this particular thing, in this market. We can introduce a card, but what if we introduce just the Naira card? For starters, because it's a very high volume period where people are traveling home. If we combine, that that fact that a lot of people were going home, combine that with the fact that, oh, if you come into your application, you find a USD wallet, you can convert that your USD wallet to Naira, and then you can then spend with that your Naira card when you get home. It just gave them a well-rounded experience. So yes, we still went with building a card, but we went with building a different type of card. And it was backed with research. So it
Uh-huh.
is always a case of ensuring that you do your own work, you go back and you do the research, ensure that you have data to back your decision to build or not to build up, right? And then present that, then see how it goes from there.
As a product leader with years of experience, what advice would you give for someone who is trying to own a strategy, right? So this is like advice to young PMs in Nigeria, right? What skill actually separates, an operator from a talker as a product as a product person?
Mm. I would say insight. So insight now can now be classified into three. For me, it's industry insights, your market insights, the customer
Okay.
insights. And if you want to own any strategy, you want to ensure that you have these three in your arsenal. Reason because in the industry insights will give you a broad view as to how different things affect what you're building in your market. So industry insight here is, for example, if you work in the payment space, right, you want to ensure that you know what regulatory framework has been introduced, or um if you know a new. So I'm going to sit a lot on regulations because that alone can hurt your business, right? Um, so you want to ensure that you have that industry insight. You want to know what is shaping or moving the market, right? So a very good example is that a few years ago we didn't have Apple Pay, Google Pay, but people were using their cards, right? But these days we're beginning to see that a lot of people have started introducing Apple Pay, Google Pay in their payment applications, right? From a payment industry perspective, Apple Pay, Google Pay, you can use it to do your payments, your virtual, use your mobile phone and do that and pay. But from a remittance perspective, for example, which is the market that I play in or I used to play in, right? From that kind of perspective, by introducing the Apple Pay, Google Pay in your flow, it just makes the experience of your customer a lot better. So
Yeah.
starting with the industry insights, it gives you perspective into the things that can, make or mar your products. Then if you bring that down to the market insights, you want to ensure that you know what your competitors are doing at all time, right? Because give you a very good example. Some few years ago, Patricia sponsored Big Brother Nigeria, right? Patricia was a crypto company at the time. I don't think they're still operational. I don't know if they're still operational. So not that I don't think. Um, but at that time there were several other crypto crypto companies operating in that market where you can buy and sell your crypto, you can exchange for gift cards or buy gift cards and so on and so forth. Um, but with the single fact that these guys went to go and sponsor a Big Brother Nigerian show, it put them in the eyes of it put the eyeballs of the entire Africa right on their brand.
On them. Mm.
So it means that in that moment, that single action would typically make people prioritize them over you. So in that case, the marketing side would help you in understanding how do we now play because of this single action this competitor did, right? So you need to be aware of what your competitors are doing pretty much at all times, right? Or in my own industry, for example, where a competitor goes to go and acquire a license in another country, and then they start talking about it, that single action can build their brand trust, which will get more people to come and use them because they're like, oh, these guys are licensed. Definitely, we want to use them. We don't want to use people that we're not sure of, right? Then come down to your customer insights. You have to always speak with your customers, because when your customers tell you, your customers will typically tell you the problem that they are facing. They will tell you, but you have to always speak with them. Right. A very good example is that is I'll use the UK launch, because that was like the last feature that last major launch I did at African before I left. Right. With the UK at the time, like I said earlier, at the time we had launched with a particular payment method. Right. Our customers were literally telling us the partnership that we should go and get.
Mm.
Why? Because they see that same partner on the competitor's product. Right. They were literally telling us that use this particular one. If you use this one, we will see it will blow you up. That was literally what they were telling us. Right. And when we introduced that into our solution, we saw the immediate impact, because customers were more comfortable with that. If you don't speak with your customers, you don't know where the gaps lie. You don't know how your competitors are better. It's just your customers will tell you that, hey, see, your competitor is giving me a better rate, right? Or your competitors, they will literally tell you. I've seen situations where where customers will do a screenshot of a competitor's send money screen, and they'll do a screenshot of our own screen, and you put it side by side, and you say, these people have a better rate, so they go and use them. They are not people that, these are not people that were paid. It's just them doing their thing, right? So if you
Feedback.
don't speak, yeah, if you don't speak with them, you would never know. There's always going to be that gap. So you need to be able to close those three things. One way I've done this in the past is, one, schedule regular customer interviews. So you have to work with your customer support guys. Another way I've been able to do this is subscribe to, so for the industry insight, I subscribe to major newsletters. So people that would typically publish industry insights in at the time in cross-border remittance, I would and I subscribe to this mostly because I was working in a space where we're operating in multiple countries. So I needed to know what was happening across different countries, even if if I'm not living there. So I'll go to like an FXC intelligence, for example. Check out, so just subscribe to what's this thing called? Google Alerts. So anytime keywords are being published online, you get that email in your inbox, and just ensure that you're
Mm.
on top of that news at all times. For market insights, I would always say that carry out something I call the market intelligence reports. So your market intelligence report is usually broken down in those three categories. So what is happening in the industry? What are your competitors currently doing? Right? And what are customers saying? If you have that your market intelligence report at all times, right, you are always on top of everything, because you would constantly go into the market to go and source for your industry news. You source for what your competitors are doing, right? And then because you're constantly speaking with customers, you can feed that into that. If you share this with anybody in your team, right, they'll even be grateful, because now you are helping them, navigate their own issues as well. So yeah, that's a way I've been able to navigate that problem.
If someone was listening and wants to become, known as a strong executor, what habits should they start, ASAP, like tomorrow?
Mm, what habits? You have to be grounded in research. Research in the sense, no, not research, insights. Insight in the sense that, because insight here, I'm now not talking about your industry market and all of that, right? You need to also be able to see what other people are doing and have the willingness to be able to try, right? Another trait that I've found is the willingness to just do. You have to have that willingness to try and take that risk, right? Because if you don't try it, you won't know, right?
Mm.
So there's always that. um Being an executor, you have to know how to work with people. I think that's the best way I can put it. Working with people means that you have to know how to manage different people and their different egos. You have to know how to manage different temperaments. You have to know when to be soft, and you have to know when you need to be
Mm.
high energy. finding a balance between both of them. Um, a lot of junior product managers, for example, would tell you that, see, developers give me headache, right? It's a common thing amongst junior product managers or new people that are just experienced. So let's just call them junior product managers. It's very common. And my advice is always that, how many times have you gone out on a drink with this person? Do you even know this person on a personal level, right? Um, you have to be able to build relationships pretty much and build a relationship with the people you're building with. Because if you're a difficult person and you want to execute something, is every some people may get scared, right, and do the work based off of fear. And some people will just tell you, see, guy, do your worst. I'm not doing anything, right? Or I'll take my time to build this thing. It's finding a balance, right? Knowing when to be, when to be everybody's friend, knowing when to, put a lot of intensity because you need the work to get done, you know, be willing to help, right? So one of the things that I would tell junior product managers are, how many times do you ask the people you're building with what is blocking them in that moment, right? Because the things that are blocking them in that moment may be um dependent on somebody that you can easily just go and speak to, right? So you want to be sure that you're building the right relationship, you have the necessary insights, right, across board. You're willing to test because there are some times when you're not just clear on the best way to approach. So a very good example is this. There was a time when we realized that it took about we were spending an average of about 1 hour on our stand-ups. And in the space, people will advise that stand-up should take 15 minutes. And this was a problem that because the team was a lot larger now, and I couldn't crack, right? Because I was the head guy, and I had product managers that were struggling with it because if I'm spending 1 hour on a call at the beginning of the day, and I'm expected to still jump on multiple calls and switch context a lot of times, how can I get productive, right? Uh, I remember that one of the PMs had reached out and was like, see, we already have this kind of structure. What if we had a structure where we had different pods, so different groups of people working on different, like a particular project. And on our call, imagine you had a team of 45 engineers and 6 products people on that call, right? And everybody's supposed to give an update on what they worked on, and it will lead to very long hours.
Mm-hmm.
And this PM was like, what if we get one representative from each team to just come and tell us what they did, right? What we realized was that single action is shortening the time to about 25 minutes from 1 hour. So you have to be willing to try, right? And you have to be willing to properly articulate and communicate your ideas. Because if this person did not reach out and be bold enough to tell me, hey, chief, we need to do X, Y. I feel like we do X, Y, Z, it is going to shorten the amount of time. And I was like, see, it's a problem that even myself I'm having. I've not had the time to sit down to solve. Go for it. And he went for it. He just went like just that. And what we realized again, that it just did not just solve the problem of time. It also helped us with context because everybody had a shared context on a particular goal. And all of them, being that just one person had to focus, it ensured that everybody was actually collaborating so that everybody had insight into what everybody was working on. So that by the time they're calling you a stand up the following day, because you already worked with everybody all day, you know that this is what this person did and this is what that person did. You can keep your response short and concise. So it just did not solve for the time that we were spending, also solve for better collaboration amongst people within the pod. So, but if the person never tried this, we will probably never know. So by combining insights plus the ability or the willingness to just try things out, or being able to combine all three, you would find that um, you become a better executor as you go on, right? Um, and again, the willingness to help, being open to collaborate, right? Because you can't be a successful PM without being a great collaborator. You have to learn to not be a difficult person. You have to be open to working with people, right? And finding a way to balance, to balance things out, especially during high tension process or moments, because in those moments, this is when your own leadership qualities actually now show. You have to be able to steady the ship, right, and ensure that everybody is going in the same direction. Otherwise, you would find cracks and that ship will sink.
At the end of the day, what does great execution feel like inside a team? So at the end of the day, right, what does great execution look like inside the team?
Oh, yes. Yes. Great execution looks like shared goals and alignment. It looks like low ego,
Hmm.
right? And the willingness to learn. It looks like speed, balancing speed and quality, right? Um, and I think that with all these three, if we're all aligned towards the same direction, if we have now, I say low ego carefully, because low ego in this case is having the willingness to learn and the willingness to take feedback and actually take action on those feedback. Um, Having the willingness to share without feeling like I'm the chief here and I miss Abi everything, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
and be able to now collaborate effectively based off of that. Having that shared vision, um, being able to, yeah, shared vision is the word. Being able to, so everybody understands that this is where we're going to, and this is how we get there, properly broken down with clear success metrics, right? So that it is not just about building. We know that when we do X, it is going to lead to Y, right? That is how I think great execution looks like.
Thank you so much, Olatun. This has been a really great conversation, and I think I opted in for a podcast chat, but I think I left with a masterclass. uh, well, yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great chat. How you feeling at this point?
Well, I'm feeling pumped because right now I feel like I should go and do a masterclass on how to execute. But thank you for sharing, for bringing me on, because I'm always, you know, looking forward to helping, sharing my knowledge as much as I do, sharing my experiences pretty much as much as I can. And yeah, this has been a very great one. Your questions too. Oh my God. It has not. Yeah, but that's great, man. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
All right, man. Thank you and cheers. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right,
Bye.
man. Cheers. Bye.